But then you've got the real subtle narcissists that
Yes.
it takes a trained person. So what is a narcissist? And then let's go down that rabbit hole a bit.
They truly are selfish people. I just like to call them selfish jerks. I don't even like the term gaslighting because it's brainwashing. They use people. They really do. And in the diagnostic and statistical manual, that they have a sense of entitlement. So some people can have a disorder and some people can just be a trace of it, but they have a sense of entitlement. They exploit people. They are grandiose and self-important. There's also fragile narcissists that act like victims and, nobody will love me but you and no one will love you but me. That's a fragile narcissist statement.
Welcome to the Prime Life Project podcast, a place to help you unlock your full potential, both mentally and physically, to become the best version of you. Welcome back to another episode of the Prime Life Project podcast. I'm your host, Daniel James, and welcome to today's episode. If you're new here, welcome. If you're a returning listener, then thank you for returning. It's always a pleasure to get returning guests. Absolutely amazing. You guys have been absolutely awesome in the growth of this podcast. I cannot thank you enough. Now, I'm actually recording this intro post-show because with everything that I learned on this episode, my introduction to it didn't do it justice. So today's episode, if you know somebody that you think could benefit from it, please share this episode with them because the content of this show is amazing. We are going to be talking about codependency and narcissism. Now, we start off talking about codependency, but then we really go down narcissistic abuse and what narcissistic abuse can look like and how to actually overcome that. So my guest today is a licensed mental health counselor, life coach, author, and speaker in her area on self-help websites. Recently, Mary's also been contributing author of Becoming Whole Again and Codependent to Independent for dailyom.com. Mary personally and professionally learned how debilitating it can be to entertain or help everybody else while disregarding your own needs. She sought knowledge and enlightenment by giving and living well during the passing of a family member. And it's her belief that others can learn to arrive from the conditioning of their past to a place of holistic abundance and enlightened fulfilment. So welcome to the podcast, Mary Joye.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
We're having a really good chat off air about technology, and you've just been wowing Mikey with your USB. And we've been talking about, so listeners to the podcast for a long time. If you ever hear me talking with a guest and you hear a little ping thing in the background, we've just discovered today that it's a problem with Zoom. So me and Mary have been trying to work off air, trying to get that sorted. So hopefully you won't get any pings, Mary, but even if we do, it's not a problem. So today we're going to talk about a subject which I know is going to resonate with a lot of people, I think, which is why when I was doing my research into you, I was really excited to have you on because it's a topic I've not discussed before on my episodes. But before we go into it, can you just sort of take my audience back to where your journey sort of started so that we can sort of build up this picture of who you are and then sort of what led you into this field?
So the journey of what led me into this field.
Yes. Yeah.
It was a catapult. I was a songwriter. I was a songwriter at Warner Brothers, and it sold to AOL, and I had to reinvent, and I had 2.5 years left on my contract, and it took me 2.8 years to get out of school. So the reason I chose counseling, I thought about law school, but then I said, I'm not a fighter. I don't like to fight for a living. And then I realized my father's a psychiatrist. I used to work in his office, and as a songwriter, I'm getting people in touch with their feelings. So same thing as a counselor. And now I've added to it because I do music therapy and I even do songwriting therapy in my office. And so that is kind of the catalyst, was actually a catapult that got me started as a counselor. And I went back to school at 45 years of age, and I was not the oldest person in my class. So it's never too late to reinvent. I mean, it would be too late to have been a ballerina at 45, but it was not too late to become a counselor. Actually, life experience is what makes a counselor a better counselor to begin with. So it was just a natural choice. And I chose the path of least resistance. It's something that I knew about. Especially and had a passion for.
With Dad's background as well, I feel it's really interesting. Like you kind of had a kind of upbringing around that sort of stuff. So you said
not that I enjoyed that, mind you, having a psychiatrist for a father. It was pretty rough. It was the beginning of my codependency. Yes.
So that's what we're going to talk about. So you mentioned about your own experiences. So what kind of experience have you had then with codependency? Because that's what we're going to talk about today. So today we're going to be talking about codependency and sort of what that sort of looks like and how people can sort of recognize it. But what was your journey with codependency?
Oh, wow. I will tell you, it started when I was very young. In fact, I'll start it out humorously. I was being the daughter of a psychiatrist. You cannot be a bad kid. You've got to be good in school. I mean, you can't rebel. You have to be like a preacher's child. You just have to be the perfect child. And who can do that? And also psychiatrist families are very abnormal. There's nothing normal. If anyone ever saw What About Bob, that would be a lot like my childhood. So it was difficult. And you always were an extension of your family's image. And for something like humorous, like I said, in second grade, my teacher wrote home, because people pleasing and approval seeking is part of codependency. You lose yourself trying to please everybody else but yourself. So my teacher writes to my father or my mother that I was like overdoing, over caring, that I was stressed out. Pretty much she was writing in there, I was a burgeoning codependent. He writes back. Now, mind you, I was in second grade. He writes back, not my mother, my father, the psychiatrist. He said, our daughter lulls us into a false sense of security that she's dependable. We must remember she's a small child. I was 7. Like, he's blaming me for lulling him, for manipulating him somehow to believe that I'm dependable and I can do anything. So that I took it to my supervisor at the time I was becoming a counselor. And I said, look at my report card. I found this in my parents' belongings. And I said, thus beginneth my codependency. He went, no, it happened way before that. You just don't remember it. And so from that, I went on to a life of always diminishing myself to lift other people up. I just did it. I was the doormat kind, and there goes a beep, but I was the doormat kind. And there is the kind that can be more of the controlling kind, like you're going to go to rehab or I'm going to divorce you. That is codependency as well, because you're still hyper focused on other people. So the best way I can describe codependency, especially in my experience, it's a form of self-harm. I realize that, you're allowing other people to use you or abuse you, which I did. I was in an abusive marriage and married another one for a very brief amount of time. I was, I don't present as someone who went through that, but I certainly did. I absolutely did. I had it like just very much similar to Tina Turner's marriage. That was for 20 years. I was married to a person like that, but you can't go home because I'm a psychiatrist's daughter. And, your dad cannot have you come back home because you can't be a battered woman and come back home. I actually heard those very words.
Wow.
So that's why I didn't go back home. So, and then the other part of it is that I just realized when I was a counselor and I worked all this stuff out in school, one of my professors, I had never even known I was codependent until I went to school. So about my internship, I was starting in drug and alcohol rehab, and she held me after class. And I said, what did I do? I didn't know what I did in class. And she said, you are severely codependent and I'm about to send you on your internship. And I said, I'm not codependent. I'm just nice. And she went, no. She said, no, they're going to eat you alive. And it's my job to help you not do that. So I went from not knowing what codependency was. She really helped me. She was definitely a catalyst. She was very kind about it. She wasn't mean. She knew I was struggling, and she could see me in class trying to people please and help other people, and, and making straight A's and all those things when you don't really have to do all that. But I did, I always overdid. And she really did help me truly recognize and neutralize it. Then I went on a quest to get better. And what you're seeing in that book is how I did it. I lived every second of that book. I developed my own strategy and I helped other clients. And then after, a decade of helping clients, I said, oh my gosh, this is really working. So I said, I'm just going to put this in a book so I can help a lot of people. Like, you're in the UK, I'm in the US, and books and podcasts and audibles and all those things are global. And I like that. I can help a lot of people. It's a global problem.
That's the big thing. It's like, no matter what you're doing, like once you go through it yourself, like you almost feel compelled to help other people go through it as well. It's like when you've got information to help, it's like you just feel this burning desire to like help other people with it as well. So can we just get and I know you hit on it there, but can we just get a actual definition of what codependency is? I know it may not be an actual dictionary definition, but I think some people, we're obviously going to get into this. You mentioned about relationships as well. So we're going to go into relationship side of stuff, but how can people that potentially listen to this, like this sounds like me, what does being codependent actually look like? What are some things to sort of look out for people to be like, or not necessarily a checklist, but how can people know if they're codependent?
Well, I have a checklist in my book, and I can remember some of the things I wrote. It was approval seeking, people pleasing, perfectionism, caring more about yourself for others, rescuing people, fixing people, giving unsolicited advice. Here's what you should do. Here's what you should do. And the list goes on about those kinds of things. You're giving of yourself to the point of giving out or burning out. You're just losing yourself caring for others. And I call it narcissism in reverse. Narcissists are hyper-focused on getting their own needs met, and codependents are hyper-focused on meeting everyone else's needs. Do you see why these two the sinews are just completely, they create trauma bonds.
Yep.
I was in them, and everyone's a little codependent. We have to be. The difference between codependency and being compassionate, when you're compassionate, you're doing the right thing and you're not killing yourself doing it. You're not burning out. You do what you can do and you don't do what you can't do. Codependents will do what they can't do. Yeah. Like if a perfect example would be if someone asked you for $10 and you were codependent and you only had 8, you would go to the bank and borrow 2 and be in debt for 2 to be sure that person had $10 and you would have minus $2. If that, hopefully some of that emotional math will just make it clear that that applies to giving of anything, not just your money, but of your time. If you have no time for yourself and you're giving everybody else time and you're not doing what you need to do for yourself, that's codependency, just giving until you give out.
I think that's such an important distinction there, because my next point was going to actually be, off the top of my head, it's like, well, what's the difference between being nice and being codependent? Because you listed your list and I was just like, well, that's just being a nice person. You know what I mean? That's kind of what you would do in a relationship or a friendship. But then what you just said there is perfect. And doing my research into you, I wrote something in my definition of sort of summing up codependency is like when you're giving your energy away without refilling your cup, which again is essentially what you've just said there. Essentially, you have 8, you're putting yourself into debt to give this other person 2. It's that same sort of thing. And this is what I try and get along with my clients here. It's like, when it comes to everything in life, like you can't give what you don't have. Now, the problem is like when it comes to stuff going, your energy going, what people try and do is they'll be like, oh, it's okay, I'll just meditate or I'll just eat well or do this. That's fine. But if you don't know where the cracks are, it's just going to keep pouring out of this cup. So it's really interesting with this. We're talking about this. You also mentioned, when I was doing research here, there's 2 things. There's codependency and covert codependency. What's the difference between the 2?
Boy, what a great time to bring that up in human history, because COVID has shown us some covert codependence, because some of them are doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, first responders. We have lost, and I'd say this with great honor to all of them, because they were doing their job, but we lost a lot of great workers in that field because they were protecting everyone else from COVID. And in doing so, they were catching it themselves. Mm-hmm. I remember I was watching, I can't remember what news show I was watching, but a doctor in New York was just crying his eyes out. He said, we've lost 1/3 of our staff in this hospital in New York. And I was saying, oh my goodness, that's what inspired me to write about that, saying that's covert codependency. And I've done the same thing. Performers are famous for it. When I used to perform, you just give till you give out. Will you play at my benefit? Sure. And you're paying for an airline ticket and a hotel room and you're getting paid nothing. So if you don't, you said it beautifully, Daniel, if you do not receive first, you can't give. And then it should be a flow of giving, receiving simultaneously. But sometimes codependents have to start with suspending giving, which they hate doing. There's withdrawal symptoms from that because it's like addiction. We feel good when we give, we feel horrible when we don't. But I tell them just suspend it for a while, and then we're going to help you give in a healthy way where you've received some. And you mentioned meditating. And at the end of each chapter, I have meditations on breaking it. And they're on YouTube. You can just access them for free. I tell people you don't have to read it. Just shut your eyes, go to YouTube, and it's done for you. And I played the music, and it just makes it easy. And I call them revision exercises. For those of you who hate the word meditation, it's just your subconscious talking to your conscious. That's all it is. And I only made them. The first one's 5 minutes. The longest one is 12 minutes. It's just to help you to revision a new life for yourself in increments. If you're worrying, you're meditating. That's what I tell people. If you know how to worry, which we all do, you're meditating to the negative. So it's just shifting from the negative to the positive and figuring out, what you really want in life. Because it's hard for codependents to know what they want.
think it's the biggest thing, like you said there, and again, it's another topic. I love talking about this, like going off on tangents. It's understanding that no matter what your thought process is in life, the dominant thought is what you will attract. So yes, you might meditate for positivity for 10 minutes a day. Brilliant. What about all the other minutes of the day that you're not doing that and it's all then negative? So again, what you're saying there is it's like, actually, like,
Yes.
even if you're worrying or doing all sorts of stuff, that is a form of meditation, but it's the opposite of what you want. Like, you become what you think about most of the time. And the problem is most of us aren't consciously aware of what we think about. And that's why then you're getting all this stuff. I didn't want to go down this rabbit hole too much because I didn't know too much about it, but you sort of brought it up because you've likened before, and you've just done it there, about codependency and addiction. Is it, because again, I don't think I'm codependent. I'd like to think that I am very good at managing my energy balance. But when you say it's like an addiction, can you explain to me, as you said about withdrawal symptoms, was there any other similarities on like why this potentially is like an addiction? Because I can't personally relate to it, so I don't know what that means.
Yes, it is. I actually went to an addiction specialist, a medical doctor. They don't make medication for codependency, and it's not a clinical disorder. So I just went to ask him, because I'm a big neuroscience geek. I said, what's going on in my brain that makes me say yes when I mean no, and no when I mean yes? And he said, well, you're bonded to people. You were conditioned, like Pavlov's dog. He said you were conditioned to get a high tolerance for bad behavior. So what happens is when you were pleasing your parents, which all children want to do, or pleasing people like your teacher, the thing we talked about earlier, when you're doing that, it's creating a dopamine response. It's instant gratification. Oh, I pleased that person, so they like me. Like the Sally Field Oscar speech, you like me, you really, really like me. She gets this instant gratification from a cold gold statue. And we liked her before she got the statue, but it took that for her to feel liked. And so you get dopamine. When you don't give, then you get cortisol and adrenaline. You feel guilty. And when you feel guilty, you get stress hormones. So there is a clinical chemical reaction to this. So when I ask people to suspend giving, I don't tell them to quit. I say, suspend it. You're going to get to do it again. You're just going to do it healthily. Just like, if some people can, if they're drinking too much, some people can just cut back. They don't have to go cold turkey. And honestly, truly, with codependency, you can't not give. I know that's terrible English, but you know what I mean. But yes, it's like addiction because it creates withdrawal symptoms. And when you break a trauma bond, same thing happens. When a narcissist is nice to you, it gives you dopamine. When you please a narcissist, you get all the dopamine. They tell you they love you. And then when they discard you, then you stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. So I tell people you have to push past the anxiety. The withdrawal symptoms are anxiety, guilt. It's false guilt, even a sense of shame sometimes. So it's a lot like addiction to the brain.
I didn't know anything about that, so I'm really glad I asked that question because I just want a bit of clarity in my head. And again, for any listeners, don't worry, we are going down the narcissism route. Don't worry. Like again, you brought it up a few times, and it's really important. I do want to get into that narcissistic route about that. Before we go down that, though, again, something's just popped into my head here when you've been talking. How important is it for codependents to identify where it's come from? So for you, it was very evident it's come from your parents. Is that an important step? Is it always linked to childhood, or can it be brought on later on in life?
Huge step. It's almost always linked in childhood. Even if you have, in my covert narcissism chapter, I put in there perfect parents can make you codependent because they're perfect, because they're modeling perfection. And if, not everyone's perfect, but yes, it's almost always linked in childhood. However, that said, people can be born with extra empathy. We've all heard the term empath, and people can be born with an extra ability to have empathy and emotional intelligence. And empathy and guilt are to be very simplistic, they're closely related to each other in the brain. So when those, the Hebbian principle of what fires together, wires together, empathy can become sympathy. And then when you feel sorry for people, you're going to give till you give out. So sometimes you can be born this way or traumatized this way. Some people can be traumatized by early relationships, like your first high school boyfriend or girlfriend narcissistically abused you, and you just, you feel worthless all of a sudden. So you have to gain that sense of worth back, and you use outside people to validate yourself. Again, you're hyper focused on how other people feel about you instead of how you feel about you. I hope that struck a nerve with someone. How you feel about you is more important than how you think someone else feels about you. That will break codependency. But you have to find the root to tear it out. When you tear it out by the root, roots wither and die in the light. So you bring that dark side to the light.
I love that. That's absolutely brilliant. I love that. And it's also what you said there about like some of this stuff. It's not obvious. Like I said, you can have a good upbringing on paper from parents, but they're not actually understanding this underlying matter of it. So when you talk about trauma there, so I've had no trauma. Okay, well, there's different levels of trauma. Like there's this trauma where someone's smacking you over the head with a sledgehammer, and there's real subtle things that are like just slow burners almost. So again, we'll cover that in the narcissism section. I just want to just not, I don't think it's playing devil's advocate. It's not. It's just more linking it back into modern day society. Do you think modern society pushes this guilt, making people feel guilty of saying no? Like we've got social media nowadays, and it's like I feel like this. But again, I'm doing research into it. The reason why I want to ask you this is because I feel like with this whole codependency and people being nice, I feel like if you set boundaries for yourself, and if you're communicating with people effectively, which is the correct thing I teach people, communicate effectively, set boundaries, then somehow society then says you're being selfish and I mean that you're not a good friend and that you're this and you're that. And the problem is, it's like nowadays, like you're connected to so many people that it's like you can't please everybody, but society's like, well, if you don't, you're a bad friend. If you don't, you're a bad girlfriend. You're a bad co-worker. You're a bad son or daughter. Like, do you think that's something? Am I on something with that?
You are absolutely onto it. Look at any, especially in advertising. And I used to be in show business, so I know how that works. Art imitates life. They are tapping into that. I won't mention I'm thinking of many different, when you were speaking, I was thinking of many different advertisements for things like that. If you well, I have to turn.
It's okay.
Only on Zoom. I had all the notifications turned off. So I know, how strange. But to your point,
you mentioned that you're on the thought path of an advertisement there just for the phone.
When you feel and I was saying, when you feel guilty, I'm trying to do this without saying the names of the people. Like if there is subjects, such as animal abuse or refugees, I'm trying to be very, very, very kind here. Even religious organizations are top offenders of it. They use guilt. They use images that are absolutely gut wrenching. And then they say, donate now. Yeah. They're famous for it. And then that codependent is just going to give and give and give and give. And so, yes, they do use guilt. And we are teaching, we're simultaneously tapping into people's guilt in one arena. And in the other one, be loud, be proud, go for it. So we're just like elevating the narcissist codependent style, because if you're selfless, you have less of yourself. And if you're selfish people really don't care whether they give or not. They don't have those empathic feelings when they see those images.
So it's interesting
that helps.
It's interesting you said this. I'm pretty sure when I lived in America, and I'm not sure if it's JCPenney here, because me and Michael were just talking about JCPenney off air, so I might be wrong here, but there's something to do with the jewelry brand. I'm sure it's when I lived in America that basically said along the lines of, if you love your wife or partner, you will buy them this. Is it JCPenney? I might have made that up, but it's essentially saying that if you don't buy this, then you are a bad partner. You're a horrible human being. Yes, it's basically saying that if your partner doesn't buy you a wedding ring from here, then he doesn't really love you. And I'm sure that's what the commercial said. It literally, am I right? I'm sure I heard that in America. I was like, what on earth? And that's the first thing that popped into my head when he said that.
I know. If you really love her, you'll get her these diamonds.
Yes, that was it. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you don't,
that is what I love so much about Europe, because Americans are very, and please, my American friends, don't beat me up for this. You all don't give diamonds necessarily for engagement rings. There are more valuable, lovely stones.
No,
it's marketing. It's just marketing. And they appeal to the guilt and the love. And look how much love you'll get if you give this woman a beautiful ring.
Yep.
So no, it's just, yes, I see. Yes, we see it.
So let's jump onto narcissists. So let's have a definition of what actually is a narcissist, because there's the narcissists we know are narcissists that are like just really blatantly narcissists. You can see what they are. But then you've got the real subtle narcissists. It takes a trained person. So what is a narcissist? And then let's go down that rabbit hole a bit.
They truly are selfish people. I just like to call them selfish jerks. I don't even like the term gaslighting because it's brainwashing. They use people. They really do. And in the diagnostic and statistical manual, that they have a sense of entitlement. So some people can have a disorder and some people can just be a trace of it, but they have a sense of entitlement. They exploit people. They are grandiose and self-important. There's also fragile narcissists that act like victims and, nobody will love me but you, and no one will love you but me. That's a fragile narcissist statement.
Is it fragile though? Is it fragile, or is that part of the game where they're playing the victim deliberately?
That's correct. That's what makes them fragile. At the heart of every codependent is an insecure person. At the heart of every narcissist is an insecure person. Narcissists overcompensate with being grandiose and just selfish. I call them selfish jerks. Sometimes in my office, I'll tell my clients, can we just not use the word narcissist? Just call him or her a selfish jerk. That's what we'll do. We're just going to put it in real terms and make it easy, because they exploit. They have a sense of entitlement. And here's the scary part. They truly lack the ability to love anybody because they don't love themselves. And so that comes across as no empathy, no sympathy, and they don't even have it for themselves. I discovered that when writing the book. They don't even have empathy for themselves because they don't think ahead that I'm going to lose this wonderful person. And if I don't straighten up. So narcissists are completely self-absorbed people who only wish to please themselves. They're also very happy when they hurt people. It makes them feel good. It really does. It's a Schadenfreude thing. They really enjoy it.
So is this the thing where it makes them feel good when they're doing it? Because again, this is I've never delved into narcissism or codependent, so I'm just thinking out loud here. Would it then be a sense of, because this codependent has got this illusion of having energy cup full of water and the narcissist doesn't?
Yes.
Basically what the narcissist is doing is essentially deliberately taking the water or this energy from the other person, and then they're essentially reveling the fact that they've taken this energy. They are consciously aware of doing it. Is that the nuance of a narcissist? Is that they consciously know they're doing it?
Yes, they consciously know they're doing it. You absolutely said it beautifully. They do. Some people call them soul vampires. They consciously are aware of what they're doing. I wish I didn't know that. I did not believe they did that. I was married to one for 20 years. I went on, when I went to graduate school, I had names for this stuff. I said, my goodness, there's names for these things. And they are consciously aware of it. They actually know what they're doing. I've had many come in my office consciously aware. They manipulate. They really do. They are not happy unless everyone around them is miserable, because on the inside they're miserable. Yep. And they project their self-loathing onto other people, which is the opposite of what a codependent does. Codependents secretly love themselves. And the beautiful thing I do, it's a very profound exercise. And I don't, it's not even a spoiler alert. I just want to help people on your show and everywhere around the world. You don't even have to buy the book to do this. But I have an ideal mate list, and I tell people in codependent crisis, because they say, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am anymore, because they've been narcissistically abused. And then I do something that it's off-putting to them, but I say, okay, now let's just stop crying for a moment. Let's make a list of 7 or 8 things that you would look for in an ideal mate, as if you've never met this person. And they look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm taking down the list, and I read it back to them 2 or 3 times, and they go, oh, that's me. I said, yes, you love you. You secretly love you. You don't hate you. Is he or she on this list? And they go, no, none of those things are on that list. And I said, okay, then this was an unhealthy, toxic relationship. And it's literally toxic because of the dopamine, cortisol, intermittent reinforcement, trauma bonding.
So that's why then, let's say you're in a relationship and the guy is, or again, let's call it what it is, or the female, the woman is narcissistic. Because I know you're talking from your perspective. So you're saying as males are narcissists. Let's be real, females are narcissists as well. Like anyone can be a narcissist. So
absolutely. I have no gender bias toward narcissism.
No. Just remember when I was talking, I was like, I was speaking as if it was all guys, and I was like, wait, no, it's not just guys. It's
no.
So what you're saying is, with this then, it is actually a chemical bond then, that because people, let's say for example me, so I'm with a narcissistic woman, and I know this, she's not good for me. I know that she makes me feel miserable, but I keep going back. Is it again like an addiction? Are you literally addicted to how this person is making you feel? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you're addicted to getting back their nice side. The Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. There is no Dr. Jekyll. There's only Mr. Hyde. That's why the title of that book, Hyde, Hyde, it should be HIDE. Those covert. They're covert about it. They're manipulating you by intermittent reinforcement. People can Google that. I Googled all the neuroscience so you don't have to. I read so you don't have to. But that intermittent reinforcement is the tool they use. They're kind. And then when you least expect it, they put you on a pedestal and then they methodically cut that pedestal back down. They build you up, they tear you down. They build you up, they tear you down. It creates a trauma bond because you go, wait a minute, where's the nice one? And then you go, what did I do wrong? I must have done, because they're telling you did something wrong. It's kind of like I call addiction faux narcissism, because if a codependent is in love with someone who's addicted, you can say, why are you drinking so much? And they go, because you make me drink so much. You see that they're blaming you. They blame shift. Narcissists are famous for blame shifting. Don't ever ask a narcissist a question, because the answer will always be some version of it's your fault. Yeah. I'm this way because it's your fault. This
is bizarre for me. I use the word triggering very lightly, but the way we're talking now, I've had an experience with a narcissist. And the more we're talking now, it's bringing it all back to me. I'm thinking, oh my God, and again, someone asked me before, I told them that I had you on the podcast, and she said, oh, are you gonna be okay talking about this? Like, yeah, it's absolutely fine. But the more you're talking, I'm like, this is really fascinating. And you're answering a lot of questions, which I think I've had, because then people say, well, then like, why didn't you do anything about it? It's like, because the person creates this illusion of themselves. And then that's what you see. And that's all you see. And again, for example, I've just had a previous podcast the day before about mediums. And he was basically talking about, it's all a trick and illusion. You sometimes hear what you want to hear. It's the same thing. Yes. Like this person creates this illusion of themselves, and then you keep hearing, it's like, oh, they've done this, which means this. No, that means they're a piece of shit. Like, let's just call it what it is. But
exactly.
But as you're talking now, it's like, so it's that old analogy of stick a frog in boiling water, it jumps out, put it in cold water and turn it up, it slowly goes on. So I think a lot of people here, this is fascinating for me, a lot of people do hold, I feel, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that when they come out of this narcissistic abuse, when they come out of this addiction stage, they will feel ashamed almost. Ashamed that and stupid almost. I think I'll use that word, that when you see it for what it is, you're a bit like, what the hell's I doing? Because obviously all your friends could see it, but you couldn't. So how do you, my question.
Sometimes your friend can see it. Sometimes they can see it. Sometimes they can't. The narcissist hides it very well from all your friends too. Yeah.
So my following question with this was going to be, how do can you, and if you can, how would you help somebody that is actually in a narcissistic relationship? So let's say, for example, right now, I see Mikey, and I know Mikey's I can see it clear as day, that he's in a narcissistic relationship. How can I help this person in that situation?
Say, Mikey, I think so much of you, and this isn't a good choice. And I really do just what I told you earlier. I educate them on the trauma bond. It doesn't set them free right away, but I'm giving them hard science for their soft feelings, so that I teach them, okay, now you need to go from wanting to fawn after them. Fawning is a term that we use when you chase after someone it's not good for you. And a fawn is the perfect word to use, because they're innocent little creatures that can get crushed by anything. They're very fragile, they're very vulnerable. So especially codependents are extremely vulnerable, because they're really chasing. They don't chase and then stop. They're relentless in trying to get back that love feeling. So I would educate Mikey and tell him, here's what's happening. And also, you said it so well. I've got emotion in my empathic cell, that you feel ashamed and guilty and stupid. Do not make people that are involved with abusers or users feel ashamed, guilty, or stupid, because that bond is chemical. It is absolutely chemical. It's like nicotine. It says right there on the pack, they'll kill you, right? But you keep smoking them anyway. And so the person knows they were dumb, stupid, or whatever. They're already beating themselves up. Do not make people in narcissistic abuse situations feel bad, because you actually get PTSD symptoms. It's called complex PTSD. You actually get post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms from being involved with narcissists for too long. I know, because I had it. I was in those situations.
And what does that look like? what does that look like? Does that come down to you doubting yourself? Because I know that for
Yes.
me, it was one of those things where I doubted my own ability because I'm quite a good judge of character. But when someone's very, 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 very good at something, it then makes you doubt your ability to actually. You talk to people, you see someone, and you're constantly doubting yourself. So, is there any other ways that this PTSD can show itself?
You get withdrawn, you get scared, you feel like no other person on the planet can ever love you like this person. You believe that. Your belief system goes completely awry. You feel anxious, you feel depressed, you can't concentrate, you can't sleep, you can't eat. You have a vagus nerve in your body that you have fight, flight, or frozen. You have all those symptoms. It kicks that vagus nerve off. That's what is attached. It comes out of your brain. It's your face, your heart, your lungs, attached to all your vital organs. So it just makes you physically ill to be separated from someone. And you're self-doubting. That is the number one thing. And when you doubt yourself, then you've dissociated. And when people, and they're not dissociated from other people, they're dissociated from their own reality. They're dissociated from themselves. They have emotional flooding and numbing, flooding and numbing, flooding and numbing. What did I do? I didn't do anything. Oh, I just give up. And so you can't judge someone going through that narcissistic abuse. It is the same thing as somebody being in an explosion or a natural disaster, because they create a traumatic environment, and that's how they keep you trauma bonded. So not judging people, like, how could you not see that? You mean he hit you 10 times, you can't see that? No, they actually can't, because their brain has rewired itself to believe they're not worthy of anything. And that's
or is it not a sense of, again, I never got to well, actually, it's in the story. Go down. As I said, the physical stuff was like, yeah, actually, I have had that as well. You then convince yourself that it's your fault you're being hit. Is that also something else as well?
They've convinced you it's your fault. Yeah. Many abusers say, I wouldn't be doing this to you if you didn't do this. Yeah. So yes, and the self-doubt is so profound. That's what I mean by they've dissociated from themselves, their own sense of reality and thought, mind, spirit. So when people judge people in these relationships, they're really judging a chemical reaction. So hopefully this will help somebody out there who's one of those, because codependents also go to the other side. You just need to leave that person. No, you need to develop an exit strategy, because you got conditioned incrementally, and you get with repetition, and you get unconditioned incrementally with repetition. Yes. Well, I always say it like this, like Yoda said. We'll lighten up a bit. When Luke Skywalker found out his dad was Darth Vader, he goes to Yoda, and I love what Yoda said, because I was in school when that came out. And Yoda said, "Oh, that's all? You just have to unlearn what you've learned." And that is what cognitive behavioral therapy is. You have to unlearn what you've learned. So don't judge people when they're coming out of narcissistic abuse into a healthier way to live. Just help them. And that's what I say. I tell people, if you go back to your narcissist, if you go back to your abuser, my door is always open with no judgment. I have no gavel in my hand. Not only have I done it, but I've undone it. So I always tell them, you're welcome back. I understand it. And each time you go back, would you observe yourself more? Would you pay attention to your tension? Would you pay attention to their tactics? And in doing so and educating them, I'm rating them, because I'm helping them liberate themselves at their pace. So they're not running, they'll meet another one just like the other one if they don't resolve it with that one. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I think
that's why you have to go back sometimes to resolve it with your own self.
Yeah, I think that's the one. First of all, like you said, you hope it's helped some people. I can categorically tell you that you've helped numerous, like I know so many people that listen to this off the top of my head that will benefit from this, myself included. I'm learning as we're going now. So this is one of those episodes that's essentially for me as well. So it's almost like I'm being selfish now, trying to get information from me, and it's absolutely brilliant. And again, so with this, I think one of the most important things you hit on, which again, I hope that long-term listeners of the podcast are picking up notes here and picking up patterns, is what you're saying is that essentially the common denominator here is yourself. If you keep going from narcissist to narcissist to narcissist, it's not the narcissist that's the problem. You are the problem for keep going back to narcissist. So you need, not necessarily the same one, but different ones. So you need to then actually, again, let's call it what it is. You need to turn it inwards. You are the problem. You need to then do the work on yourself so that then you then don't fall into the trap of narcissists. Is that correct?
Correct. Because again, I was 3/4 of the way through writing that book. the codependent discovery and recovery, because I was discovering things as I was writing it. And I never forget when I looked up, I took my hands off my Mac keyboard and I went, I was self-harming. I might as well have just cut myself with razor blades. I said, oh my goodness. And I typed codependency as a form of self-harm. And I elaborated on that. And I discovered it as I was writing it, because I said, this is, and I knew that in some way. I knew you're supposed to take responsibility. I heard of all of that stuff. I realized that, but when the epiphany came, this is a form of self-harm. Then I said, okay, this concept may help people more than anything. You're not, by allowing other people to hurt you mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, or spiritually, because all those chapters are in there, all those different forms of abuse, you are harming yourself. And if you know they're going to hurt you again, and if you believe the best and the worst of people, one researcher called it pathological altruism. It was actually a group of researchers, and it makes sense. You believe the best and the worst of people. Mm-hmm. That is scary.
I wrote something down there when you were talking, because it's something that, again, like as I said this before when we were talking, it's taken me back. One thing I used to say to myself is, why am I doing this to myself? Because it's like, as you said there, the self-harming, like, although there's no physical, again, in your case, there was. So unless someone's physically hitting you, again, it's still self-harm, because you're psychologically abusing yourself. And again, if you are self-harming yourself, you know you're doing it. And then afterwards, you can see what you've done. You're like, oh my God, why have I done that? It's the same sort of thing with this, isn't it? It's like, you're like, why have I done this to myself? And it's really interesting when you said that just popped into my head. Again, just out of nowhere. And it's understanding,
exactly right.
It's understanding with this as well. There's different levels of this narcissistic abuse. Like, as you're saying there, unfortunately, you were at the extreme end of, again, like physical abuse. And again, it can at some point lead to death. But again, it can be very, very subtle as well. As you sort of said, where it's just little comments, little small, subtle comments. But actually over time, then what it does is it completely eradicates that person. Like, they've got no self-worth at all. And they're then completely dependent upon this person because they've created it that way.
Yes, they've created the bond, and you fell into the trap. So awareness, this is why, and that's why I said, take away the word meditation, just being conscious of your subconscious. If I had to boil the book down, what is that book doing? It is making people conscious of their subconscious reactivity. Not just their subconscious mind, their subconscious reactivity, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual. We get all these good feelings when and narcissists, the truly manipulative ones, the master predators, will present as victims. And the reason that science calls them fragile or vulnerable narcissists is because they're not grandiose. They pretend to be the martyr. It's scary. They are just that, they're like a few centimeters shy of sociopathy, and they are on the same cluster of disorders in the DSM: antisocial personality disorder, which is sociopathy, borderline disorder, and narcissism are all on the same cluster. They called cluster B. I call them a different cluster. I'll try to be nice, but that makes sense.
I didn't know that at all. So
yes, they're all related to one another. They all lack empathy for other people. They're all self-serving.
So hopefully people here listen to this again can put the link together of why codependents need to be so careful of narcissistic people. And again, working on yourself is the first step of anything. Like, the way that I liken working on yourself is like you're putting your suit of armor on so that you can go into battle again. Like that's how I sort of liken it. So can we just sort of talk about recovery then? So when it comes to recovery from codependency, now again, we can liken this to anything, but let's stick with, I think, the theme of narcissism, because I think that's probably relevant to people. What does the recovery look like for someone? What sort of stages and steps would you potentially take someone through to recover from narcissistic abuse if they're codependent?
Great question, Daniel. And it probably surprise some of my colleagues, because I don't do the just leave, because I know they can't. First, I deal with their anxiety because it's intense and immense. Sometimes I have to send them to doctors for medication because the anxiety is so intense, and they just keep going back and they keep answering every text message, and they make themselves available to the narcissist just to be heard again. Because the narcissists come back. If you've left one or one has left you, they always come back. So when they come back, you get those feel-good chemicals. So first of all, I deal with their anxiety. And if I have to send them to a doctor, I do. but I can also help them to just realize, like recognize and neutralize those triggers, make themselves less available. I do, tricks of the mind, like tell them to turn their cell phone off for 3 or 4 hours a day. But the most important thing I do that my colleagues might not agree with in recovery is I let them go at their own pace. I let them go ahead and make mistakes and go back unless they're in imminent danger. If it's physical abuse, then of course, in the state I live in, sadly, I do not have to report it. That to me, that's not all that great to not report it, but I do help them leave at their own pace, because when I slow them down to what's comfortable for them and then help them push a little bit past that, like, go 3 hours a day without answering a phone call. If he texts you and says, I love you, I'm sorry, I did the wrong thing, or she does that, I tell them, don't answer that right away. Give it 3 or 4 hours. You have your power back there. You take your power back. And then I teach them the number one thing is to lower the expectation of the narcissist and to raise the expectation of themselves. Because then when they try to trauma bond you again, instead of saying, oh, he loves me again, or she loves me again, they go, oh, I expected you to say that. I expected you to do this. If they're mean to you, just say, oh, I expected that. Do you see how powerful that statement is? Oh, I expected you to do that. Yeah, I expected you to do, whether it's being nice or nasty.
Okay, so let's play devil's advocate to this, because I wrote down here narcissistic pushback. So I've had it before where you work with people, and again, I'm not a therapist or counselor, I don't claim to be. So this is me talking to friends about this before.
You should be. You're great. You're great at figuring it out.
So with this pushback, like from what I've discovered is like the more you try and set boundaries, the more you try and raise your level, the narcissist hates the fact that they're losing control. So then they turn it up another notch. So how can someone combat that? Because again, like you said, you've still got this bond, you're going through the stages, but then what happens is when the narcissist knows they're losing their grip, they tighten it again. They know exactly where to hit you, they know exactly what to do. So then how do you coach someone through this narcissistic pushback?
Well, if it's love, I'll do the 2 different scenarios. If it's the love bombing kind, like I tell them they'll bring you 1 rose or a Rolls Royce, whatever they can afford. They will just bring you gifts. It's a Trojan horse always. Recognize it. Recognize it. They give ingratiating gifts to get you trapped, like the diamonds. Okay. The things we talked about earlier. Exactly. They bring you whatever they can afford, whatever they know you want, which means they knew how to do that to begin with. So say, oh, I expected that. Same thing. If they're nasty to you, then you can say, well, I expected this person to be nasty. And that's easier to leave. But sometimes it's simultaneous. Sometimes they'll say, I love you and I missed you. I've been dating this beautiful person, be it male or female, been dating this beautiful, then they'll go on and on about the beautiful person. So do you see how they just simultaneously love bombed you and discarded you? They've told you, I love you and I want you back because I was with this other person who I don't love as much as you, but they've just told you I've been cheating on you, and you just get self-doubt
and they're telling you how beautiful this other person is as well. They're this and this, all and what that other person coincidentally will be all the things that you're not. So for example, if you're a slim guy, oh, he's absolutely jacked. If you're bald, oh, he's got loads of hair. If you can't grow facial hair, oh, you have this long beard. So it's all the things that you aren't, or that you are, your insecurities. Again, I don't know if I'm making it up, but in my experience, that's kind of one of the things where
that's exactly correct.
Yeah, they throw it on you, then it makes you being like, oh, well, actually, if they had this perfect thing that I'm not, and then they're saying they love me, then it's like, oh, okay, then it kind of must be, then they must love me because they had this amazing thing that I'm not, and they're choosing me over it.
Exactly. You have it. You should write a book. You absolutely have it figured out.
I didn't realize I was going to be so vulnerable on this episode. Like as we've gone into it, I'm just thinking, fuck hell, I can explain that.
Everyone has been narcissistically abused. That's why I'm working on a project about how to deal with them when you can't say, because all of the pop psychology and all of the psychologists tell us go no contact. It isn't realistic. Some of these people are our bosses, our parents, even children can be narcissists. You might be by a non-narcissistic parent, but you may have built one. You might have built an entitled kid by just giving them everything all the time, and you may have to deal with it. You can't always go no contact, but you can be aware. When you're acutely aware, you're prepared. And I always work with that fear factor. it takes all the fear out, because fear and excitement do the same thing to your vagus nerve. You know, you can, the same thing that takes your breath away at the Grand Canyon is the same thing that takes your breath away when you have a panic attack. So if you expect them to love bomb, discard, it takes all that fear away. And instead of saying, what's he going to do to me? What's she going to do to me? Then you change it to the excitement part and go, it'll be interesting to see what tool of manipulation they use to get me back.
Yeah. So
you see the difference? One is almost, very powerful.
Yeah. You're like looking ahead. You're like preempting. You'd be like, oh my God, like it's almost like you're turning it into a game rather than being the victim of it. You're like, right. So what thing have we got today? And you're going with a completely fresh, open mind.
Yes. And I love that, Daniel, because the moment a codependent comes to my office and says, well, now I'm the narcissist because I'm playing the game, I go, no. It feels like manipulation, but it's self-preservation. And the moment someone tells me they feel like the narcissist, I said, welcome to the healing. Let the healing begin, because now you know what self-care is. You feel selfish, but that's a false signal from the guilt they imposed on you, but you're really self-caring, and it's so unfamiliar to them. They feel like the narcissist. I go, nope, no, you are set free.
So one thing I said, again, almost playing devil's advocate with this, because you get people that say they've been hurt in the past. Let's say they were codependent. They were in a narcissistic abusive relationship. They've then had to switch roles to essentially become the narcissist, to step away from that. Can it then full circle, and then actually the codependent actually become a narcissist? Because is that something that can happen? Because you hear people say, can't you? Oh,
Not really.
I don't know if this is a narcissistic tool, actually, because they're saying, oh, I'm only like this because someone hurt me. So I'm just trying to play devil's advocate to see if that's an actual thing. Because when you mentioned it there about, so I know you're not becoming a narcissist. I know you're doing it for an end game to get out. I just don't know if it can then twist, and then it's almost like you turn over to the dark side, and it's like a Star Wars. Yeah.
Well, I always say, and it's a beautiful point, because when people come in and say, now I'm the ruthless, BITCH, whatever, they'll say things like that to me. I go, okay, but to find balance, you have to go from one extreme to the other. So again, people that are codependent or just nice people, it's exhausting. I tried being a tough girl one time. I tried being tough. I said, this is exhausting. So someone who truly has empathy, who is truly kind and a genuine, compassionate person, which most people are. I do actually believe that most people are that way.
I think everyone's born nice. And through some things, they then become that. So yeah, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you there. But yeah, sorry.
No, because we're one of those glass full people. We see that is that, yes, that little infants don't come out stabbing their parents. No, something happens. Their brain gets rewired. Something has happened. They can be born with things that are set to happen. Disorders usually don't show up in childhood. They show up in adolescence and adulthood. So is it nature or nurture? My professors always taught me it's 100% of both. It doesn't make sense mathematically, but it's a combination and a compilation. But so could a codependent actually become a narcissist? Because their empathy is so high, they could try to stay that way for a while, but they will exhaust themselves and they'll just go back. I tried it. I can answer that from experience. I said, no one's going to get to me. I'll be that avoidant type. No one's going to hurt me. I even wore leather pants. Oh my gosh. It was the 80s. Okay. It was like, they were in style back then. But I said, this is exhausting. This isn't who I am. I'm not a tough girl. I'm not mean. I was on the KISS tour for 3 years. That was my first job out of college. And I said, it's a perfect job for me because meeting the demands of 4 rock stars was nothing compared to my family unit. I mean, it was easy to meet their demands, but I said, wow, this is exhausting. I just couldn't, I can't be tough. That's not who I am. So codependents seldom can become the narcissist. They'll go that way for a while and become selfish just in order to self-care long enough to flip back to balance. And the quick fix that I give for codependent recovery, the quick fix is after they've gone through everything you and I have talked about today, I'll have them shut their eyes like a guided meditation just for a moment. And I see them reverting, and I do it I revert every day in some way. I do some behavior that'll take me to that dark side. And I shut my eyes and I go, imagine spending the rest of your life like this. Just imagine I have 36,500 days to live. If I live to be 100, do I want to spend another one of those days like this. And so I tell them, imagine overdoing, overgiving, stay like you were, go back to the narcissist, go back to this person, just do everything like you were. And they go, oh, that's so mean of you. I go, okay, you're mad at me. Good. Be mad at me. And be mad at yourself. You don't want to go back. Because when I have them open their eyes and say, now, where do you feel that in your body? They get physically ill thinking about going back to being what they were. You just can't. But they also can't be tough and mean. So that's when balance occurs. They find balance.
This honestly has been an incredible episode. So I just want to finish with one final question I ask all my guests. What is one piece of advice that you would give someone that feels stuck and out of control with their life? Now, I know that we've covered a lot here today, so I just didn't know, just in this final question, if there's like a sort of almost summary, because someone would listen to this episode and there's so much information and they're going to be like, oh my God. So almost in summary, if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, oh my God, I'm completely stuck, I'm completely out of control, what is one bit of advice that you would give them to help them in this moment?
Interesting. And this isn't plugging my book. It is it's called Deductive Reasoning, but it's at the end of every chapter of my book. If someone is stuck, and I certainly was, and even when I get stuck now, you have to, that in all the law of attraction, all those things will tell you not to do this, but sometimes that's where you have to start. You have to start with what you don't want. So when someone comes in my office and tells me, they say, I don't know what I want anymore. I ask them what they don't want. I'm writing it down on the other side of that paper. I've made it. They don't know what I'm doing. I'm writing down. If they say, I don't want to be hurt by someone, they do want to be loved by someone. If they say, I don't want to be broke, you do want to make a living and be financially independent. I'm writing the opposite. And then we're going to tear off that list in my office. I'll throw it in the shredder, or I'll give it them to go home and burn it. That's actually more effective. But from you deduce, meaning subtract, deductive reasoning. It's an old tool of it. Then you're only left with what's right. And that's on my book, what you don't want's on the left side, what you do want's on the right. So you're only left with what's right for you. And at the end of the book, I have them burn the left of the list. So they've written their own self-help book. And I did that in my own life. And every time I get stuck, what don't I want? And it's funny when people are making that list, they always will come out of being stuck. They'll quit saying what they don't want and they start evolving into what they do want. And they're not aware of it. And I make a little asterisk where they've switched from what they don't to what they do, because that's the pivot point. When they start saying, then they know what they do want. They're figuring out for themselves. I help people listen to themselves. That's my job. So listen to yourself and start with what you don't want, write the opposite. It's a great way to get you unstuck.
I've done that again, a long time listening to the podcast when you went on goal. So I did some goal setting workshops because people were like, I don't know what I want. I get it all the time. I don't know what I want. So I will say, okay, we'll write down what you don't want, because everyone knows what they don't want. I don't want to work a 9 to 5. I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want that. And as you said, like law of attraction, like again, you don't want to be saying that. However, if you're using it productively, then what you do is you've got the things you don't want, literally write the opposite, because if you don't want that, then by process of elimination you must want the opposite. It's like, it's real simple. And it's like I'm so glad you said that. I'm so, when you started talking, I was like, yes, I use this as well. It's absolutely brilliant.
It's deductive scientific reasoning. If this, then that. If not this, then that. That's all it is. When you're stuck, you just do that. It's similar to writer's block, because I am a writer and I was a songwriter before. When you have write, you just write whatever's on your mind. And people go, well, that's just crazy. I go, no, just sit down with a blank page and go, I don't know what to write. I have nothing in my mind. I tell them to write crap, and from the crap comes the fertilizer for just keep writing. Just don't stop writing. Even if we were writing down, I don't know what to say. I have writer's block. And I think this started. And then when I think this started when this happened, all of a sudden it unlocks the block. Because you're forcing past your anxiety.
Yes. And what you're doing is, so I say to people, this was actually one of the questions I wanted to talk to you about, but again, I was cautious at the time, is I've heard you mention about how powerful journaling is for you. And it's something I recommend to people as well, because what I'll say to them is I say, set a timer for at least 15 or 20 minutes, because what happens is once you get into the flow, you're turning off your conscious brain, and then your subconscious comes through. And what will happen is you'll start writing stuff you didn't even know, and you will start to answer your own questions. So sometimes I do it in my journal next to me. If I'm feeling a bit prickly, I call it, where my mental health's a bit not where it should be, I call it feeling prickly. I will write and I'll say, today I'm feeling, and then I just write and I set a timer. And what happens is, when I'm start breaking it down, I will come up with the reason why I'm feeling that way. Like I answer my own problem, if that makes sense. And it's bizarre because you're just turning your conscious brain off because you can't keep up. So your subconscious has to take over and you just end up answering your own question. It's a bit bizarre.
Yes. I call it vent and reinvent. When I send someone to journal, I'll tell them, I like bullet point journaling actually, but I tell them to vent, but they can't stop there. They need to reinvent. Like, okay, here's the problem. Like you just said, what can I do about it? This is what is and what you want to be. That simple. It's really, I make it easy. It's easy. Your honestly, brain wants it easy.
This genuinely, I didn't know what to expect when he came on. Like I said, I knew we were going to have a good conversation because I've done my research into you, and I knew that you're very good at communicating, articulating. But the rabbit holes in the paths we've gone down has been absolutely incredible. So I just want to say thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. You asked great questions. Yes, and I hope that people, when they heard this today, heard you figure out what narcissism and codependency and all these smoke and mirror tactics that are used against compassionate, kind people. You don't have to be a codependent to have people use you or abuse you. I hope they see that you were listening to yourself.
Yeah, I love it.
That's all you were doing. That's important.
So where can people find out more information about you, and where can people find out more about your book? Obviously, I'm going to get Mikey to ping it down the bottom of the screen, but where can people find out more about you and where to buy your book?
Well, I'm easy to find online because my name is spelled with an E on the end. It's Mary Joye, Joye. So Mary the regular way, Mary Joye. And I'm all over the place online. You can get my book on Amazon or wherever books are sold. It's on HCI and distributed by Simon & Schuster. And my website is winterhavencounseling.com, or I have a Google site. I'm easy to find. You can email me, call me. I do coaching with codependents from all over the world because it is a global issue. Like I said, many cultures are taught women are supposed to be servants, and many cultures are taught men are supposed to be the man of the house. So we're just supposed to be interdependent, connected to one another healthily. So I'm easy to find.
Honestly, genuinely, I know a lot of people are going to be hitting you up after this. This has been absolutely incredible. Thank you very much.
It has been. Thank you so much. It was lovely. Wonderful. Thank you.